This classroom lesson is a cooperative effort between the Wisconsin Public Service SolarWise for Schools program and the Create Energy Center. What's on our roof? Lesson 3. Using the UI. Introduction and Lesson Objectives. Welcome, students and teachers, to What's on Our Roof, a series of lessons in which you'll learn from the photovoltaic performance data produced by your solar array. This is Lesson 3, Using the UI. In this lesson, you'll learn the basic layout and use of the eGauge user interface you'll employ throughout this series of lessons. The eGauge user interface, layout, and navigation. Your teacher will provide the instructions you need to get to this place, the eGauge user interface. This is what you'll see upon arrival. Your school, or if your school doesn't have a solar PV array, the school you'll focus these exercises on. A quick sidebar may be needed here. Your home screen may not look like this. It may look something like this instead. If so, be patient. We'll get to you in a moment. This home screen displays several windows, buttons, and dialog boxes. Most of them you'll seldom or never use. And then there's the one you'll use almost all of the time. Your home screen defaults to a one-day solar PV output profile, graphically displaying one day's solar output. Power production in kilowatts will always be provided on the y-axis of the graph you see. It'll always be given on the y-axis of any graph you see. Energy generated in kilowatt hours will always be given here for just the time interval you see, the green area below the curve. It'll be provided here for any graph you see. It's important for you to remember that for any default graph you work with, current time will always be shown here, and the default period selected will stretch back from the current time. That's why in this one-day output profile, you see PV production from 2 different days. That's also why the readily available graph selections will seldom be of use to you. You'll usually need a graph and the information it provides to be for a very specific or defined period of time. In this lesson, you'll learn how to set that up. But first, a quick look at the features available on this interface. At the bottom of your display, you'll see these controls. If your graph looks like this, you can probably ignore them. Feel free to experiment with them, but you probably don't need to change a thing. But if your graph looks like this instead, well, that's cool. Your teacher will review how to deselect certain options to get to this graph. But you do have a cool graph in front of you. Your graph shows solar production the same way as the graph we've been talking about, but it also shows energy consumption for the home or business in red. What's really interesting is what's shown in white. That's the energy use that's been offset by solar PV generation. It's electricity that doesn't have to be paid for. It's been paid for by the installation of the solar PV array. For extra credit, take a moment to think this through. What 2 things could happen with the energy produced by the PV array that doesn't offset the owner's energy use, the area of the graph that's green? Here's another area of the home screen or default view you're welcome to experiment with. But there isn't much you can do or change with these links, and they're of little use to us in performing these exercises. This green area won't be of much use to us either. Regardless of the time period chosen for your graph, it always gives you the PV energy produced for the last 30 days. You'll probably never need production data for just that time period. This set of buttons is interesting. They adjust the scale on the y-axis, the axis on which power is displayed. The default set is Auto, which provides you with a scale that makes your graph visually as large as possible and still fit the space. Please experiment with these buttons to see what happens. We'll give you specific instructions if it ever becomes necessary to change from auto to a different scale. This is another set of buttons that's interesting, will probably never be used, and you're welcome to experiment with. They change the time frame you see on the screen. However, it must be remembered that any time frame you select here always brings you up to current time. You've heard it before. You'll need a time frame and the information it provides for a very specific or defined period of time. A time period that doesn't, for example, split days into pieces. Now we get to an area of the graph that you'll regularly use. In this blue window, you'll always find the energy generated by the PV array for the time period selected on the user interface. You'll need this number a lot. Most of the time you'll be reading an energy generated number for a time period you specifically input. Select the correct time frame and you'll always be able to read the correct kilowatt hours of energy produced during that time frame here. The majority of your use. All of this brings us to the button on the UI that will occupy the majority of your use. This one. Before clicking on it, we'll return to the default view you see when you first arrive at your school's user interface. Note, this one-day view shows you parts of 2 days' solar output. We're looking at the 24 hours that bring us up to current time. That time period is shown here. Data from a time period like this will seldom be useful. Now we click on this button. It opens a window that permits you to enter the time frame you want to see and get information for. Spoiler alert, several exercises that require you to do this await you after this video. Click here. Change the default dates and times to, in this case, a more useful one-day view. Click Set, and now we get a true one-day view that graphically shows 24 hours of solar PV output during the spread of just 1 day. Along with it, we get power and the energy information we need for just that 1 day. If you want to focus on just the hours of PV production, that's easy enough. You get the same production data, but you get a graph that's more visually detailed. Now watch carefully as we apply one more time frame. In review, the user interface, its layout, its features, and how to use it. This has been Lesson 2, Watts on Our Roof, using the UI. Now, perform your lesson-specific exercises, then move on to Watts on Our Roof, Lesson 4.